Have you ever experienced the feeling of being in a place that is usually filled with people but now just sits empty? Like a classroom after dark or an empty office building. A place that was once very lively but now is the exact opposite. I have experienced this feeling when exploring abandoned buildings or when being in a mall or store after everyone has left. When I would go to school for events that took place long after the halls had emptied of students. Or when working at a theme park when it is completely empty. All of these places can bring out that feeling that up until now I didn't know the name of. This feeling has always creeped me out, and it's called canopsia, and it is described as the eerie or forlorn atmosphere of a place that's usually bustling with people, but is now abandoned and quiet. This can go for places that people still visit or places long abandoned. This feeling can actually extend to video games as well. Let me explain. Empty video games with open worlds can be very creepy. Imagine walking around Los Santos and everything is empty. Not a single NPC is around and every building you can enter is void of life. Walking around multiplayer maps and games where the player base has long moved on also gives off these creepy vibes. The multiplayer map, usually filled with other players, is now empty and devoid of life. It gets even creepier without the music turned on. Next time you load up an old game for nostalgic reasons, try playing a multiplayer map with no sound or music. Play alone and then describe the feeling. You'd probably describe canopsia to the T. Now apply this whole concept to a game and you'd have Portal. Portal has always struck me as a creepy game, one with creepy undertones just under the surface. The horror lies just beneath the veil of what the game offers. Portal stars Chell, a girl that is woken up in a rest chamber by an artificial AI named Glados. Glados leads Chell to the testing chambers and has her complete different puzzles to go from room to room. Chell must complete these puzzles while under the watchful eye of Glados. The whole concept of the game is creepy, an AI that watches the player complete puzzles and monitors their every move. Chell is being watched and analyzed from the second she wakes up. Chell must make her way through the puzzles and try not to die along the way. The game takes place in a series of testing chambers, empty corridors with nothing but testing equipment inside. The equipment includes cubes, buttons to press, moving platforms, and electrical equipment. The testing chambers are filled with the sounds of the building groaning and soft ambient music along with Chell's footsteps. Signs of life before you got here all around you. You can find clipboards and coffee mugs all abandoned. These facilities were once filled with people. They were used by the scientists that once conducted tests in these chambers. Now they're gone, and all that's left is the empty chambers themselves. This really brings up that feeling of canopsia, as the whole facility was once a testing lab for the scientists that worked there. It was a place of work, a place of business, and a place where people made their well-being. Now, it's anything but. It's an empty building with just remnants of what used to be there. You're alone and probably will remain alone as you travel from testing chamber to testing chamber, hoping not to end up like those that have walked these chambers before you. The audio in Portal is far darker than it needs to be. For the most part, it's just ambient sounds of the building mixed with low musical tones. These are perfect as they instill an underlying feeling of dread in the player as you continue through the game. The audio makes you feel like there's something darker just beneath the surface. The music, when you do get music, is very dark and filled with mechanical tones. It really drives home that feeling of being alone in a lab. The music also dips in and out as to never quite become comfortable for the player. The horror or underlying horror of Portal works best when it's not at the forefront of the game. Having the tension and horror building in the background to make an unsettling atmosphere actually helps to cement the tone of the game. It also allows the gameplay to be the primary focus of the game. The audio is the perfect accompaniment to a game so drenched in the feeling of canopsia. The sounds make you feel alone as you travel around using your portal gun. Even the moments of humor in the game don't do a whole lot to make the player feel comfortable. And that is all by design. The feeling of canopsia is further compounded by the dread that the player feels from the audio. It wants you to feel alone, even if it's not quite a horror game. Nothing is going to jump out at you. You're just going to feel like it could at any moment, which is probably one of the biggest strengths of Portal. You never quite feel comfortable. A lot of the underlying tone of the game is set by the antagonist Glados. the AI that I mentioned before. Glados is an ever-present fixture in the game. From the moment Chell is awoken, Glados is talking to her and telling her what she needs to do. In the beginning, she's more ambiguous and seems to be doing everything in the name of science. She'll give you random advice and tell you how good you're doing. A few tests later, after Chell has started to blaze through most of the tests easily, she'll start to make snide remarks, like she's mad at you for completing her tests. Once you made it to near end of the game, she starts calling Chell fat, stupid, and a loser. It gets more severe the further you complete the test chambers. Near the end of the game is when she truly shows what she's like and what she's done. You see, before Chell woke up and before the game started, the Aperture Science Research Facility was a testing facility filled with scientists. Those scientists would develop different technologies, most of them being for the military. In order for the scientists to do their job easier, they decided they wanted to make an AI to help out. For a while it was fine. Glados was helpful to the teams, using her for their own work. One day, Glados released deadly neurotoxin onto a group of scientists, killing them. It was then deemed that Glados was too dangerous and they shut her down. Following this, the scientists decided that they would give Glados personality cores in hopes to make her more human, and to hopefully give her some empathy. The whole personality of Glados was actually taken from Caroline, the second in command at the facility. The personality cores didn't work, and Glados this time would release a deadly neurotoxin into the entire facility, except for the sleep chambers. The humans that were kept alive in the sleep chambers would be awoken by Glados and forced to undergo testing until they were no longer of use to Glados. Usually they would die during tests, but not always, in which case Glados would have to finish them off herself. Having Glados watch the player as they run through their tests is very unnerving. She's always watching you, no matter where you go and what you do. You're alone, but you're not alone at the same time. Not every scientist in the facility died. There was one survivor by the name of Doug Ratman. You don't find out much about him unless you read the comic that was released between the first and second games. In the first portal, you'll encounter these small areas known as Ratman dens. The dens were areas where Glados couldn't monitor him, and where he would be mostly safe. You find your first Ratman den in Test Chamber 16 behind some protruding walls. Once inside, you'll see the drawings of a very crazed individual. The cake is a lie is written in several repeated sequences along with a handprint. Tally marks run on the bottom and tops of the wall, showing how long he had to be living here before he disappeared. There's drawings of the portal gun and the companion cube as well. These are Ratman dens. The canned food he was eating can be found nearby, and other random items lay about. He was living for months in these dens, just trying to survive, trying to escape Glados. He was the same as you. The Ratman dens are probably the creepiest part of the first Portal game. It's the first real look the player gets to see what happened to the scientists of Aperture Labs. It's also a look into the life of a man who had to try everything to survive while under the watchful eye of Glados. The second Ratman den you find is much creepier in comparison, though. The first one was in a place that you could easily find if you just played the game. The second one is still easy to find, but just a little out of the way. You actually have to use the portal gun to get inside. Once inside, you'll see how much his mental state has deteriorated, as he has replaced the faces of pictures of people with the companion cube, a cube that Chell uses to complete some of her puzzles. It's so much creepier in this den. RIP is written in red ink, or possibly blood underneath some of the pictures. Also on the side, written in the same colored ink, is "She's watching you." If you look over, you can see the camera looking directly at you. On the opposite wall are more pictures of the companion cube. The companion cube even has hearts drawn all around them. Clearly Ratman attached himself to this thing, possibly as he was going insane from lack of human interaction. On the floor you'll notice some wall cameras are just laying about, probably removed by Ratman and stuffed here for whatever reason. Maybe the feeling of being watched was too much and he removed them to help ease his feelings or vent his frustrations. The final section of walls has "Stop Watching" written in red ink. There's even more scrawlings about his love for the companion cube and some more artwork of it as well. There's even a poem written to the companion cube. The poem is actually from the poem "The Reaper and the Flowers," just modified to have the companion cube instead. Ratman was almost in love with the companion cube, and it getting taken away could have been the final thing that broke him. The next test chamber you'll find just has "She's watching you" written repeatedly in red ink. Help is also written in the same color. In the chamber is an alarm clock and some canned food. Ratman didn't live here nearly as long. Once Chell has completed 18 of the 19 tests, she'll be sent to her last test. This one has the promise of cake once completed. The test chamber itself isn't very hard, which is strange since a lot of the tests before this one were. Just as Chell is rounding the corner on a conveyor belt, you can see a cake sign on the wall. Then you'll see the flames of an incinerator waiting to end her life. Chell has completed all the tests that have been given to her by Glados, and now it is time to eliminate her. The best way to do this is, of course, to burn her alive. This ending could be very dark, but of course Chell can escape with the portal gun. She escapes to the back office rooms of the building. As soon as you do, Glados starts to mock and taunt you. The backroom areas of the facility are actually far darker than the rest of the game. The normally pristine white testing chambers are now replaced with empty office rooms, stairs that are in heavy need of repairs, and rusty machinery barely keeping this place alive. Chell will have to maneuver around obstacles and listen to Glados basically have a meltdown while Chell makes her way towards the center of the building. She has no eyes on Chell and can't tell what she's up to, and this frightens Glados. Chell makes her way to Glados' chamber, and finally we're able to see what the monstrous AI looks like. She's a robot hanging from the ceiling. She taunts Chell some more as she enters the room. A short boss battle ensues where the only goal is to incinerate Glados' personality cores. Every time one is incinerated, Glados lets out a scream of pain. When the last one is destroyed, Glados is destroyed and the fight is over. The game ends with Chell, barely conscious, staring at the open sky and destroyed portions of the building. It only lasts a second before Chell is dragged backwards and slowly loses consciousness once again. Of course, there's so many things that are creepy in this game, from the Ratman dens to the ambience, to the ending and Glados herself, but that's not all. There's a multitude of theories surrounding the game and its content. Let's go over a few here. The first theory from the game that I want to talk about is the one that actually got started by MatPat from Game Theory. His theory is that the companion cube is actually created from the dead bodies of previous test subjects. This theory is explained very well in one of his videos from many years ago, but it's definitely an interesting one. It would give new meaning to why Ratman was so attached to the companion cube and why Glados made her specific remarks about it when Chell is forced to destroy it. If you want to watch the theory in full, I'm sure you can find it on the Game Theory channel still. It's pretty good, if a little dated by now. The most talked about theory was about if the cake was actually a lie or not. Of course it was used as an incentive, but in the ending of the game, a cake is shown for a few seconds before being extinguished. The cake itself exists in the game, but it's not accessible by normal means, so the cake is very much a lie and just used by Glados to pull in her victims, even though she's still forcing them along anyways. The cake is a lie would become a meme following the game's release. The art and theory surrounding the game would become a hot topic as well. The main theory, and really the reason I wanted to make this video, was the theory of Glados' design. If you look at her, she just looks like an oddly shaped robot hanging from the ceiling. The design makes sense, but was it supposed to represent something altogether? If you look at some images of Glados, you'll notice she kind of looks like a woman in a very odd and uncomfortable position. This theory goes to state that Glados is meant to represent a woman bound and gagged while being hung upside down. Pictures like this one have since come from the theory, and it really makes everything just a little darker. Was this intentional, though? The developer commentary states that they decided on something feminine coming from a mechanical base after getting lost in a design for the character. She wasn't supposed to specifically be a woman bound, but that's how she was interpreted. It actually works really well for the kind of character arc Glados would have in the following game. The image itself isn't enough to make this one of the creepiest theories I've seen in a game of this kind. It's something that's stuck with me for so many years as well. The biggest theory in the game is the backstory of Chell, and well, we'll get to that one when we cover the Nightmare Fuel of Portal 2. Thanks for watching everyone, and have a wonderful night.